Hey, welcome to the CMO Whisper Show. I'm your host, Steve Olensky. Part marketing practitioner, part ad agency veteran, part journalist. I was a writer for Forbes for 10 years. I've had so many insightful conversations over the years with business leaders, to athletes, to celebrities, to, of course, CMOs. The only difference now is instead of sharing those insights through written form, I'm doing it this way. My guest this week is Dan Gardner, the co-founder and executive chairman of the technology-first network Code and Theory. They work with brands like Microsoft, Amazon, Google, JP Morgan Chase, and on and on and on. One of the many, many things we talked about was the eerie similarity between 2001 and 2024. Here's my fascinating conversation with Dan Gardner. Dan, welcome to the CMO Whisperer Show.
Well, thanks for having me. Quite the energetic introduction. Thank you for that.
I'm caffeinated, so you got me at a good time.
Yeah, I'm medium caffeinated. I thought about throwing another coffee in, but I figured it could take it to another level that your listeners may not like.
So I really want to jump right in. You and I talked the other day offline, if you will, and I want to start at one of the points that topics we talked about, and that goes back to 2001, which I think we both agreed was a tipping point in the world of marketing and mobile and digital, and everything's going online, everything's going mobile. And I want to transpose or juxtapose, or whatever the word is, into that tipping point into what you see as another tipping point right now, and compare and contrast.
Yeah, so I started the company in September 1 of 2001. So I'd actually say mobile wasn't even really a thing. I mean, we were still like texting via T9. So it's funny now to say I started a digital company or technology first creative agency. You know, we weren't so clever back then. Before there was mobile or social media or any of what we just expect now. I mean, it was basically flash websites. And we were coming off the .com bubble at that time, which meant at that point there was a lot of investment. There was now crumbling to say, oh, the future of the internet's going to mean this, but it didn't mean that immediately. And then everybody retreated. And then over the next now 2+ decades, we saw a lot of those same ideas, but come back in much more meaningful ways. And I think I think it is an incredible comparison because through that, now nearly 23 years later, we've seen things like mobile. We've seen things like not even mobile, the iPhone very specifically transform the world. We've seen things like social media. But if you actually think about it, nothing has changed that much except incrementally changed, meaning like we're still using message boards, Reddit. We're still messaging, like Slack or iMessage. I mean, we had AOL Instant Messenger in the late 90s. I know we want to say it's crazy different, and it is, but it isn't that much different. A lot of the articles look like the early web blogs. They're just designed a lot nicer. The backbone was the algorithm, which is the biggest changer. And you could argue the mobile phone make it more pervasive. But the way we do things actually kind of stayed the same over the last couple of decades. It's just incrementally got a lot better at doing the things that we've been doing in the early internet. And the reason why 2000 to now is very similar is that early internet was the transformational moment where we now spent the next 2 decades refining. And I do believe we are at that moment again where things are going to look drastically different, not incrementally design something better or put a little algorithm behind it to make the feed be more effective. It is actually going to transform the way we behave, the actual behavior and how we interact. And maybe it won't be touches and clicks. Maybe it'll be something completely different. Obviously, voice seems the obvious one, but there's other technologies like spatial computing and gesturing that are coming out. We will see a huge difference. And I haven't been this excited since 2001 on what the difference will be in the next couple of years.
I agree with everything you just said. We're definitely at that tipping point. And I'm curious to hear what have those changes meant from then till now for marketers in particular?
Look, in the early 2000s, and part of the reason I started Code and Theory is I worked at a traditional agency and I was frustrated that, they still just wanted to do traditional ways of advertising, either, direct mail or, commercial, like traditional 30-second spots. And number one, I would say it's surprising that it took so long and it still exists and that model still exists. Like it's not over. That is the biggest thing that I think I would have been wrong at if you asked me a question in the early 2000s. But look, the reality is everything changed on advertising. I mean, digital first really means the ability to be smarter with data to target and reach people in more meaningful ways. That's really what it means. And we've seen slowly but surely not only budgets of like where the media dollars go, but what the backbone of the way you do media, the way you think about creative, the distribution channels that we execute on, that has dramatically changed. But that said, you still do you'll see around the Super Bowl time, everybody thinks a 30-second spot is still the most important thing that ever existed in the world of advertising. But behind that, most of the money is actually going to being very, 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 very smart and creative, smart with technology and creative. And that's the huge difference, is adding that smart with technology.
Before I move on, I'm going to get back to code and theory and ask, why is it important for you to have the split between creative and engineers?
Look, to me, it's common sense. It's not just smart, it's common sense. If I talk about, the change in advertising, and the change of advertising is using creativity enabled, by that backbone of technology, that is the way you have to solve modern problems. It's not just the big idea. It's not just the campaign. It's how you execute across all these channels to bring consumers and users or customers, whatever you want to call them, to maximize them as efficiently as possible. That's like the goal here. And people live in a technology first way. You need a technology first approach. Technology can't be relegated to a tactic. Technology and digital has to be the strategy. When we say digital first, that's what we mean. It is the strategy. It's not like, here's an idea. Oh, look, we know how to make something, so therefore it is digital. No, you have to start at the beginning part. It has to be a digitally minded and at the strategy level. And to do that, you need technologists. You need them at the beginning. You need to understand the capability and what's possible, because some of it is very, very nuanced. We want to simplify it, and it should be simple, but the reality is nuanced, and technology is nuanced, and you need scale to be able to do that. So that's why, as our name suggests from the beginning, creativity and technology is the way to solve business problems in modern day challenges. And that's what we've done that, and we've intentionally grown our business to have that balance.
Interesting. All right, let me pivot back to the current state and how 2000 till now, and the two-letter word that is on everybody's mind, that's the elephant in everybody's room, and it's AI. And I know you have a lot of thoughts on it, and I want my listeners to hear, but I think I want to start because I ask every listener about, all right, sometimes I almost do like a word association, AI, go. But with you, I want to talk about, like, what are people missing, in your opinion, when it comes to AI?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, there's a lot of people what is missing. Number one, because we all don't actually know it, and I'll put myself in this category as much as I have a lot of opinions. I think there's a lot of fake experts, and I think there's a lot of our industry is normally we come out and we all think we're experts. I just want to say that like it's unknown. But I think the biggest thing that I've come to terms with, if you ask people about AI, especially within the creative industry, everybody seems to think they have the answer to what is uniquely human. And they can define what is the value of what we as creatives do, because that is uniquely human. And I think what's missing is we don't know right now what is uniquely human or what is uniquely creative. Mm. And I don't think it's humans that will be telling us this. We may have hypothesis, but I actually think it's the reverse. The computers, the bots, the AI robots will tell us what is uniquely human and what is uniquely creative. And I think if you come from that starting point, it's sort of you approach it a bit different instead of the assumption that what you have is so special. So like I'll give an example of what we're doing. We are having everybody rewrite their job descriptions in what a world using AI looks like. And that is not something that we know the answer to today, but it's a process over hopefully the next 12 months that we will continue to refine, so we don't make an assumption, number one, on what it will be like, but we're looking for that answer. We're looking to technology, to what could it do? How can it solve problems in ways that I don't need to actually spend my time doing, and I can spend my time doing other things. And out of that, we will learn what makes us uniquely creative, what makes us unique in every human way. So I think that's the biggest thing missing, is kind of the discovery of that.
You said something earlier that touched the nerve. I'm paraphrasing, but you mentioned about, I think you said something, there's no shortage of AI experts out there.
Yeah.
which
which is amazing, isn't it? Do you agree? I mean, you meet a lot of people. You must meet a lot of quote experts.
yeah, and I think you and I are in the same boat of where I'll be politically correct and say, how could you possibly be an expert in something we know very little about?
Exactly. You can have opinions, but are we really experts? I don't know.
No, I'm a born cynic and skeptic. I don't know, but that's just anyway. It just blows my mind, and then how many people flock to those so-called experts because they hung up a shingle that said I'm an expert.
Yeah. Remember all the metaverse experts?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, and now don't forget AR and VR and all the other
exactly
things that came and went. And social media to me is always one of the crowning examples of everybody was an expert in social media.
Yeah, remember, not to reminisce, but remember social media war rooms were like the hottest thing ever, and you weren't a cool agency unless you could stand up a social media war room.
Of course. Even if you didn't even know what it was, you could still say, I have a social media war room.
Yeah, because it sounds awesome.
So let me start internally on the topic of AI. Are you hearing anything from your staff worried about their jobs?
Yeah, I mean, look, change creates fear. Mm-hmm. So, I'd be lying to say that there isn't some fear. I mean, but we started when I started Code and Theory, it's like, we didn't have all these things. We've changed so many times. We are in the business of change. We're not in the business in solving a problem the same way. Luckily, Code and Theory, I'm just speaking on behalf of us. So whenever there's been a pivotal switch, that's actually been good for us. Again, is there a little fear? Of course. It's like, this one's a little scary, but typically it's good for us. So we are, for the most part, it's opening new creative ideas. I've said this joke a lot of times, but I'm personally having a creative anxiety attack because there's so many ideas. Everything's going to look different. And if we're in the business of making things look different to find success and differentiation and opportunities for our clients, isn't that amazing? Mm-hmm. And I think we, at Code and Theory, we buy off on that idea that wow, what an opportunity. What happens if we were to rethink travel, or we were to rethink, education, or rethink what it means to be a CPG brand, or any of these things? If you actually go, okay, clean slate, because now we have a technology that allows us to do a lot of things. It's not just generate some images. It allows you to do a lot of things. How will we do this differently? What could we do differently? That's an amazing opportunity when you get a brief to solve problems. So yes, is it scary? Of course. But also on the flip side, isn't that what makes this business fun?
You just took the words out of my mouth, and I'm a big fan of not staying in a comfort zone too long. And to me, AI is a tool, and it's the people who can harness and know how to use that tool will be the ones who be the most successful.
Yeah, and I'm not the first to say make this analogy, but once upon a time we did typesetting and printing presses, and there were some people afraid of the computer with desktop publishing, and a couple of people got left behind because they were too afraid to pick up the computer and do it. But for the people that picked up the computer, they loved it, and it transformed the things that they can do with design and execution, and printing got better, and so this fundamentally changes who we are, which we're not as used to. But that's awesome. I think it is.
From an external perspective, are your clients asking hey, what are you guys doing with AI? Are you using AI? How are you using it?
I think the reality is there is a spectrum. Yeah. I would say, first of all, AI is now in somewhat a table stake. There's nothing that doesn't have a component of AI. It could be an early component and some everybody talks about the brainstorming and all that stuff, but it's going way deeper than that. And then there's that, it gets to the spectrum of how ambitious does a client want to be? Is there there's some clients that we're thinking really long, because a lot of the AI talk is actually short. What I mean by that is what can I do with it today? Can I do a campaign stunt? Can I use it to increase my efficiency in the way I do creative? But then there's the thinking long. How does it transform my relationship with my customer? What does it mean? What can I do differently there? And I actually think it's the ultimate CRM play. AI is the ultimate CRM. And I keep talking we're moving from this idea of personalization, which has never actually been that personal, to an era of anticipation where I can think through, a customer's need, want, and desire and deliver value at the right moment. That is fundamentally changes your relationship. So I'd say we have the spectrum from like, let's dabble, let's play a couple areas, maybe let's do some workshops, let's do some innovation typey projects, and then there's some that's like, hey, we see that there's an opportunity here to disrupt and or be defensive, because if you don't disrupt, there's certain industries that may be completely wiped out, and we've seen this before. Like media and publishing has went through several iterations of this, and there's certain clients that are just really ambitious, and it's a pretty fun time to do this type of work right now.
I get the sense, and all the people I talk to, and I'm curious to get your thoughts. I get the sense that there's an educational play that needs to happen with AI.
Yeah, 100%. Mainly because also, well, a couple things. One, it's deep technology to the question of like, why do you have all these engineers in a company with creative people? You know, when you get something that's this technical, actually, the technical stuff matters. It really does open up possibilities. It makes you understand. In this case, there's legal ramifications. There's a lot of considerations you need to do this. How do you get your data in order to take advantage of it? How do you keep it safe? How do you keep, there's so much in there. So there's the nuance of education, and then there's the bigger problem, which is the way the media talks about it. They really simplify it into like job losses. It's like a very simple narrative, and that simple narrative actually, I think, becomes a barrier to people to even ask the right questions, to be honest, because we're in the question asking phase of this thing. Maybe soon we'll move to like full solutions, but right now we're in question phase, and I don't know if people even know what questions to ask, and I think that part makes it intimidating. It's hard enough to ask questions. Another hard thing to ask questions you don't even know what to ask. And I do think that creates an educational barrier. Again, not too similar to the early 2000s where people wouldn't even touch digital stuff because they were afraid, because it was a bit intimidating. I think we're there a little here as well. I agree.
I think it's fascinating. I'm an amateur student of human nature, and I can't help but think that so many CMOs and leaders kind of privately going, I don't really know a lot about AI, but if I raise my hand, it may weaken my value.
Well, I'm going to look at it a little differently.
Okay.
I look at it as traditional companies have traditional silos, and the CTO, the CIO, the CMO, it's been a little more clear on their roles and responsibilities. And AI is a technology that kind of touches all of them, and it forces a certain type of collaboration when successful that is not so natural within organizations. And I think that sort of collaboration that is required, not just at the C-suite, but even more so as you move down layers within the C-suite, that collaboration I think is intimidating and not natural. And I think that actually is a big, big barrier.
Yeah, what you just said about not natural, that gets back to what I said earlier about getting out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, exactly. It's a real comfort zone.
Yeah, we all know how reluctant people are to change to begin with.
Yeah, hence why, start thinking about your job in a year from now, because it's going to be different than today. That's why I actually think you have to be proactive at it. You can't be reactive at it. You have to be proactive. You have to think about what that would be, because I think if you could think about it, you actually get more comfortable. Instead of being told to you what your job is or whether you have a job, be proactive on what that job could be. I really think that is important, both as a company, like what is our company in the future? What is our individual role in the future within a company? Those are important questions to ask yourselves to get yourself comfortable and out of that comfort zone.
Exactly. So let me there's a 2-word phrase that meant something a lot different in 2001 till now, and that's digital transformation.
Mm-hmm.
Back then, like you were talking about, everybody's like, oh my God, digital, we can't. What does that mean? Run for the hills. Now, fast forward, digital is obviously ubiquitous, but what does that mean, that term mean now in 2024, especially now in the AI age? So if I say digital transformation, it means a lot more. It means something different than it did then.
Yeah, well, I think now it means nothing because there's no shared meaning, and people throw it around and think they're doing it, whether they are or not. Like some people think just reprioritizing to digital touch points is digital transformation. I mean, it's part of it, but it's not really it. I mean, the reality is that digital transformation today, if you were going to do it, is really AI transformation. And what it really is business enablement that connects all parts of your business, connects your uniqueness that is probably going to be your data sets that you can acquire, and then using creativity to execute and reach consumers in a meaningful way. And it's the connection point of all that through the digital technology, mainly AI technology. And, there's other components to it, but it's rethinking your business inside out. That is digital transformation. It's not just the marketing. It's not just using a couple tools. It's literally the way you communicate and enable your business to be as effective as possible utilizing technology. That is, to me, digital transformation.
You just touched on something so important, and I know that most of my listeners are in the marketing field, right? But digital transformation has to touch every part of a company.
Yeah, I mean that's what I sort of to the point where I was like, with AI and the CMO and working with these other areas more than ever, that's important. It's just not possible, or you're not doing you're not doing the job correctly. And it's service design. It's like how you give more value, not just how you reach people. Like, are you going to just spend to drive traffic, or are you going to also spend to drive loyalty and better lifetime value? There's so many components here. And, one thing that we've been saying this forever, and it's sort of I think it's an obvious point, but like, you really got to like work hard to land it. But like, we always say a brand is the sum of all its interactions. Meaning, like, no one goes and goes, okay, this is Nike in retail versus social media versus the actual shoe versus the, sponsorship deal. It's just Nike. That's what it is. And when you think about like digital transformation or a digital first approach to it, you actually have to figure out a way how you can use technology, which is the center point of everybody's life, to actually connect everything. So it's as meaningful as possible and consistent, and you could drive that one touch to the forever touch, and you can drive it to sales and conversion and all those things. That takes a lot of effort, and that takes coordination, and more so than ever, it's not just marketing anymore.
Yeah, it can't be. The company will never succeed.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we already know you're a tech-led company, right? And we touched on creativity and AI, but I want to expand on that. Like, can creativity and AI coexist?
Well, yeah, I like to think it's technology-enabled creativity, if you like that concept. It's like, how do you use technology to enable you to be creative? So to the point of like my earlier of like, we will not dictate what makes us uniquely creative, the technology will. But there is going to be a point where it's like, why wouldn't you let it do everything that you can that leaves you the point to just think as big as possible? I mean, creatives love thinking big. That's like the favorite thing they do. I mean, yeah, they like pushing pixels and designing and think through type, but what they really like to do is think big. So if you can take the minutia of pushing pixels, like maybe we go from a pushing pixels industry to something that is just thinking and just inventive. It's that mentality. And I'll give like an analogy that I've been thinking a lot about. When you're 7 years old, okay, you mentioned I have a lot of kids, so I've seen this. Actually, my youngest is 8 now, so I'm past the 7-year-old point with my 5 kids. And you have a creative skill, and usually defined by this: you could write, you could draw, you could sing, you could dance, you could play an instrument, something in that zone. You're maybe you could act. You get put in a bucket and say you are creative. And this happened to me in life too. Oh, you're creative because you can draw a little better than the next person. Okay. And then everybody else gets put into you are not creative for the most part. And it kind of, when you're younger, everybody kind of does it. But as you like grow up and you're in high school and in college, you go farther and further from like what is deemed creative, because you don't have the ability to do that skill anymore. But what happens if I said the skill doesn't matter because that's democratized? It's democratized through technology because anybody can design something. If I think of it, I want it to look this. I want it to be elevated. I want it to be colorful. I want it to be, all these things. And I want to achieve this. And actually the skill of the actual making is democratized. You actually open the world to a newfound freedom of creativity, where there's certain people that may be actually very creative. Some of the most creative people I've ever met in my life can't pick up a pencil, and draw something, but they like just think in ways that I can't even explain. But those people haven't been able to be in positions, and maybe, this is scary, and maybe like listeners won't love this. There's certain people that weren't ever actually creative; they just had a skill, and that it will be different. And that could be a little scary, but I do think that could be a reality in the future. But that means, I just want to land this plane, the people that are creative will be more valuable than ever, because it will be amazing what they could do. Amazing.
You touched on another soapbox issue for me, so I have to go here. I speak at colleges all the time, and I love to do this. And it's usually MBA students. And I'll say, everybody show me a hand who thinks they're creative. Like half the class raised their hand. And I said, what if I told you every single one of you in here is creative? But society puts these labels on you that if you're not this, then you're not creative. If you're not a writer, a sculptor, a designer, an artist, you don't have that label. And it drives me crazy.
It's exactly my point. It drives me crazy as well. Like, I don't understand. I mean, I'll not to go back to code and theory, but we have this saying, only be limited by our own creativity, both as a business, what we can do. Like, that's our limitation, how creative, and as an individual, like, don't put restrictions on yourself. Remove those limitations. Your creativity is what you can do. That's what you can be. No one's one single thing. Everybody could be creative. I don't care what you are. I do joke, except maybe the accounting. They should be a little do things properly. But really, everybody is creative. I don't care what you are. You could be a producer. You can be whatever. Like, we all have that ability.
Yeah, like I'll say to the class, like, for those who didn't raise their hand, have you ever solved a problem? And I go, well, of course I have. Well, then you're creative.
Exactly.
And you see the light bulb go off.
It's amazing. And I'll give another kid analogy. I have a son that like absolutely hates reading and writing. You know, it's not too uncommon. I have luckily a daughter that loves reading. But what's interesting is he started using ChatGPT and he loves the idea of coming up with a story. So he loves the idea of prompting it to make a story, and then he kind of laughs at the response of the story that's being created from his brain, but he would have never wrote it. He would have never took the time to do it. That's pretty amazing. That's someone that would never want to do that, have no interest in it, but actually loves actually coming up with ideas that will be outputted as stories.
That is fascinating. It's encouraging too.
Yeah, to me, yeah, it's definitely inspiring.
Totally. Let's go to the 30,000 foot view, because you, like me, you've been at this for a while, and I want to get your thoughts on, if I say to you, how do you look at the current state of marketing right now?
That's a good question. You're going to make me speechless, and I'm rarely ever speechless when asked a question. I mean, look, I think, as I said before, I'm surprised at how slow certain things that I would have imagined wouldn't be as relevant is still relevant. Like that's surprising to me. So, but that said, I always like to say, like, when I started the company, I was a kid, and I grew up as the company grew up, and the company grew up as the internet grew up. And I do think the sophistication is pretty also, at the same time, there's things that are pretty sophisticated. I mean, the technology stack that we can build marketing on top of is way more robust and mature over the last decade that empowers you to do things that are pretty incredible. Like, that exists as an underpinning, and there's an entire mature SaaS market that allows us to do incredible things that exist. And now we have this new technology, as we, not to keep harping on it, that may disrupt that. But actually, it's getting pretty crazy. And look, most people would admit it's pretty crazy as a consumer, whether you know anything about advertising or not. Most people would say, oh my God, Instagram is amazing. It knows me so well. Like, not only is it like fine tuning my content, but I see ads that I really love. I mean, is that not a testament to advertising, that of things that people love are making it to people, and they're getting that emotional reaction that I like? Sometimes it creeps them out and all that stuff, but clearly it's pretty sophisticated, because I know when I was in 1995 and I was watching TV, every other ad wasn't something I loved. I was bored half the time, and occasionally I got a cool ad. Now I scroll through my feed, and most of it I kind of really love, or I like a lot. That says a lot about the state of advertising, which also says a state about the level of competitiveness to be successful when the market has matured to get to a place where you could reach a lot of people with competitive products in a way that they love. So I say I'm talking a little both sides of my mouth, but I think it's both true.
No, I completely agree with you. And to add on to that, or just give my own spin on that, I've long held the belief that marketers don't give consumers enough credit for knowing more about what we do than we think they do, if that makes sense.
No, I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, they are oftentimes more sophisticated than us at the things, and then we want to pretend like we are, to the fake experts side of things. We want to pretend like we're always one step ahead, but sometimes actually more often than not, we are one step behind, because something happens whether culturally or behaviorally, and then we're all racing to catch up and do something that relates to it. I mean, if you think about it, more often than not, that's the state of marketing. It's a catch up place to catch up instead of be ahead.
Yeah, it's the FOMO, right?
Yeah, there's definitely that.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the type of marketing, to be honest, that like irritates the hell out of me. Like the look-alike, because it exists, we should just do it, versus the more, I want to call it imaginative. I think creative is a word that is like overused. So I'm going to say imaginative. Like, well, what could it be like that doesn't exist, instead of just replicating some model that exists, and then be smart around it with what exists.
About 3 or 4 years ago, I wrote a post on LinkedIn and I called it the 7 Most Dangerous Words in History. And they were, that's the way it's always been done.
Oh my God. I totally agree.
And I had some, exaggerated ideas, like if Edison, we're good living in the dark, Tom, right? Like, right. But I was showing a point, like if everybody in history, we're good. Just, it's incredible. And marketers, I think, take it to a whole nother level going, I'm hitting my numbers, so why do I need to fix anything?
It's crazy. To me, it's the worst strategy you could ever do as a business, because it's the way it's done. Either it's the way we do it, or the way it's done. Both are the worst possible strategies you could ever do. We actually talk about that a lot too. And it's shocking. Maybe it's sort of to the point of like familiarity and comfort zones and risk taking. But remember, like, forget about digital or anything. The best advertising is risk taking advertising. The best.
Yeah.
Like, the most iconic can-winning things, or if we reflect back, it's where a risk was taken.
The first thing I thought of when you just said that is the Super Bowl blackout with Oreo. May not be the most iconic, but for whatever reason, when you said that, that's the first thing I thought of.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I remember that. I knocked Super Bowl a lot, but that was actually a good one. That was that's a good approach. Like, there are these moments that is imaginative.
They took a risk.
Yeah.
Now, it wasn't a big risk, but still.
No. I don't think the risk needs to be big. It just needs to be true to itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's why I think the copycat type advertising is not true to itself, because it's chasing the wrong thing. It's not the right risk.
That is the key, the right risk.
Yeah, just like if we were a private equity company, you have to take risks, right? And you do analysis and you try to be smart, but ultimately you have to take risk. Ultimately, it comes down to a risk decision. And you could be informed, you could have data, you could have analysis. I believe in all of that. But ultimately, there's still a risk that needs to be taken. And I think the same thing is about advertising. You need to find risk moments. If it's all too safe, there's no risk, but you should use all the tools around you to be as informed as possible on it.
Yep, exactly. I'm going to pivot completely here and looking at your career. Is there one person who's had a bigger impact than others on your career?
I mean, there's been many pivotal people. I mean, to be honest, it's all people around me. I mean, like, Code and Theory is way more than me. So, like, I'd say I'm a small part of it. I just want to start there. I'll give you an answer, though. We have a COO who works at Code and Theory, and he's a bit older than me, and he doesn't come from the agency background. And actually, I got tricked into hiring him. Like, someone else that was involved with Code and Theory tricked me into hiring him. He was tricked into being hired. And I'll tell the quick story. So he's like, I don't know. I just make people better. I don't know what to tell you. That's what I do. And I'm like, oh, when he first started, which I don't know, it was like a decade ago, I was a bit more naive and like a bit more arrogant. I'd be like, what do you mean you just make people better? What does that actually mean? So anyway, he started at the company, and I would go into his office every day. And he'd say, oh, I have this idea. I'm like, oh, come on. You don't think I thought of that idea? Again, I was a bit more arrogant. And then maybe 3 months into it, he came up with an idea. And I was ready to like just shut it down and be, again, a bit arrogant. I'm like, oh, actually, actually is a good idea. And I sort of reframed myself, and I was just open in different ways. And the idea that, like, to the point, it doesn't need to be done that way just because it was done that way, that it really hammered home, because he wasn't from the industry. And he was just like a business person that was very creative, couldn't draw, couldn't do this, but he was the most creative business person ever. And he affected me on how from a management standpoint, from like how I think about like, humans and like scaling a company, and like how we think about like creating the right culture and, making decisions and working procurement, which is always a challenge, and just every facet. Like it just made me rethink everything and kind of make myself a better person ultimately, better at my relationships in my personal and professional life. And I would say him more than ever. And to this day, he still says he's not an agency person, but I have to remind him, if you're working in the agency world for a decade, you're an agency person. So I would say him, and it's just like untraditional approach to business in the agency landscape.
Well, it speaks to your, as a leader, you have to be open to that. So not to like heap praise on you, but it's true. You have to be open to that kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's funny that, because I had only a crack of opening, but that crack of opening allowed me to open more.
Right.
And then that's reframed me in everything I do of like how to be open. It's in the intro you mentioned like on discourse. That is kind of why I started that with a couple other people of like the idea about difference of opinion is incredibly important. You need to be challenged because we are all fake experts. We are all guessing. We are all, I believe, slightly insecure, no matter how confident one is. And you need to surround yourself both with trusted people and be in a trusted group of people, whether it's like the people you work with or out of work, that will actually disagree with you. Mm-hmm. That is very, very important. He brought that to me, and now on Discourse, hopefully we're bringing it to others. That I think that is the key. If you were really asking me what's the key to creativity, it's actually disagreement. That is the secret science. It's not a napkin. It's actually disagreement. And having empathy and trust with other humans that allow for that disagreement to have in a productive way, that is the most important thing to creativity.
That healthy discourse, yeah.
Yeah, healthy discourse. That is the secret hidden ingredient to the best type of creativity.
Interesting. Okay, I have to close what I always do. It's about music. The people listening can't see, but you can see the album wall behind me.
Yep.
I'm a huge fan. Music has played a big part in my life, as it has for a lot of people. And my favorite song of all time is Lean on Me by Bill Withers. And lyrics have always resonated with me. So I always ask every guest, is there a song lyric or anything musical related that has a little more special meaning?
Oh my God, that is like, it is almost impossible to give the single song meaning. Mm-hmm. I mean, like Lean on Me is a great, I see that. I would have a problem with it, just to push back on you, even though it's meaning to you, so I can't push back on someone's feelings, is I have a problem sometimes when it gets so overplayed that you almost don't hear it anymore.
Oh, that's a whole, yeah.
Yeah, that's a side note to that. I mean, look, I'm a huge Bob Dylan fan.
Okay.
And Bob Dylan in general has songs in many different constructs, whether it's like societal constructs, whether it's like human constructs that resonate with me. It's like too hard to say one thing because it's like, music is that way. I mean, I'm a big Bruce Springsteen fan as well. Like I like storytelling that makes you think. I mean, I think I see the corner of a Bruce Springsteen album in your background right there.
It is Born to Run.
Yeah, I mean, like Nebraska is obviously the best. We all can agree that that's the best, even though it may not be the best to listen to, although I do also think so. I think it's the best album. I can't answer one song. I'm sorry. That's like a lame response, but it's how you catch me. Although my son, which I don't know if I should be proud of or scared of, asked me to play Talking Heads' Psycho Killer this morning, drop off to school. I was proud because it was like pretty deep for an 8-year-old, and then I was a little mortified because of the title. But that one's popping in my head only because I listened to it this morning.
That's awesome. No, there's no wrong answer to that question. So you answered it as honestly as you could. So that's all I want.
Steve, come on. There could be a couple of wrong answers to that question.
No. Absolutely not. Listen, okay. We're up against it. I've had an absolute blast. I say this a lot. I really want to have a part 2 with you. I think there's so much to cover more with you, but I really want to thank you for your time and coming on.
Oh, thank you. Listen, you want me to talk and I can just, that's my weakness. I can just keep talking. So you want to do a part 2? I'm down. Let's do it.
You got it.
Okay. Thanks, Steve.
Well, that wraps up another episode of the CMO Whisperer Show. I hope you shared this episode with your friends. And if you have not already, please subscribe to be kept up to date on all the latest episodes. And if you're so inclined, leave me a review on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you.